But Neil Anderson writes in Victory Over Darkness in chapter 7, anger signals a blocked goal. Any goal which can be blocked by forces which you can't control other than God is not a healthy goal. Everyone say healthy goal. It's good to have healthy goals. Not all of our goals are healthy, because your success in that arena is out of your hands. And Neil Anderson goes on to say, people who believe their success is dependent upon others will end up fighting with those they perceive to be blocking their goals. In other words, if you've got your eye on a car park and you've been sitting there patiently with your blinker on, somebody comes around from the other direction and boom, into your car park. Block goal. What do? Block goal. You see, because it's dependent upon somebody else to fulfill that. That's right. And so often the goals that we set are dependent upon others fulfilling that goal. And when they don't perform to our expectations, we start to get frustrated. And if we don't deal with that frustration, in other words, if we don't take a step backwards and go, flag, signal, anger, emotion, getting frustrated, what's wrong with my goals? What's wrong with my thinking? What do I need to do to realign my thinking or my goals with God's goals? Yeah? In Genesis 4, 6-7, it says, so Cain was very angry. Everyone say, very angry. So Cain was very angry and his face was downcast. And you can see that in people. And as we go through this morning, you can apply this to yourself. You can be asking myself, hey, do I ever do this? Do I ever do what Cain did? When I'm really angry, I'm not yelling or screaming or shouting, but man, you can see it on my face. Then the Lord said to Cain, why are you angry? Why is your face downcast? So here's God the Father coming along just to have the parental chat with Cain. And they're having a little discussion. And God says to Cain, if you do what is right, will you not be accepted? But if you do not do what is right, that fox, now I'm putting this in, the fox, that little fox, sin, is crouching at your door. Remember, foxes crouch before they leap and they camouflage themselves. It desires to have you, but you must rule over it. The foxes ate the blossom in Cain's life that day, and it brought death into their family. He was not able to rule over the sin that was crouching at the door. If you go back to the original Hebrew, the word that's used in Hebrew is symbolic of an animal crouching ready to pounce. And this little fox had got into Cain's thinking. Cain had brought his offering, but it wasn't acceptable. And sometimes we have an offering. Sometimes we bring our tithes and our offering, but maybe the way we bring it or what we do is not acceptable. And maybe we get annoyed, we get frustrated, we get disappointed, we get angry even. And that little fox just sneaks in there because what we have done has been rejected and it hasn't been accepted. And we feel our expectation is that whatever I do, I'm sacrificing here, I'm helping you, and you're not accepting it. You're rejecting my help. And you know what it's like? You never ask them to help you. And then all of a sudden they're pouring all that toxin over you. And they're angry and you end up being angry. And that little fox has just crept in and he's taken the blossom. Something that should have been beautiful, something that should have borne fruit has suddenly gone. It's disappeared. It's gone. God pleads with Cain, but Cain was not willing to do what was right. His offering, although it was an offering, was not the right way. And we can do a lot of right things, but not in the right way. And then it's not accepted. And we have to come to terms with that. We have to change our thinking. We have to realign our thinking if we want to be accepted. Jonah had problems with his perception. In Jonah chapter 4 verse 1 it says, "But to Jonah this seemed very wrong and he became angry." Now, why was Jonah angry? Because God had told him to go to Nineveh and to preach to them and give them a chance to repent. And of course, the Ninevites had been really, really, really cruel to the Israelites in the past. And so there was no way that Jonah in his heart wanted to pour out God's love and compassion upon these very, very cruel people. And so when God asked him to go to Nineveh, what did he do? He got in a boat and he went exactly the same distance to Nineveh, but in the opposite direction. So what did God do to bring him back on course? Well, he sent a storm, and then they had to throw him overboard. And in the middle of that, how gracious is our God that God turns everything to good. All of the people on the boat came to know about the God of all gods and the Lord of all lords, and they prayed to him because of Jonah's disobedience. And so they throw Jonah over, albeit very reluctantly, throw him overboard, and a big fish comes along. And he's in the belly of the fish 3 days, which, of course, is symbolic of Jesus dying on the cross and being in the grave for 3 days. And then he's spat up on this beach, and they say that he was now an albino because of the stomach acid that was in the fish. And so everybody knows, they've heard the story. Everybody in Nineveh is like, wow, there's something amazing about this man. And he preaches, and everybody, the whole city, repents. And verse 2 of chapter 4, he prayed to the Lord, "Isn't this what I said, Lord, when I was still at home? This is what I tried to forestall by fleeing to Tarshish. I knew that you are a gracious and compassionate God, slow to anger and abounding in love, a God who relents from sending calamity." Verse 3. "Now, Lord, take my life, for it's better for me to die than to live." You see, he couldn't celebrate the fact that they had repented. And sometimes we have to be honest with ourselves. Our goals are wrong. And when we see somebody else get blessed or we see something go good, because we perceive our perception is false, our thinking is wrong, and we don't see it through God's eyes, and so we judge the situation according to our own feelings and to our own limited knowledge. And then when something good happens to people that you know are rotten and mean and evil, you have trouble accepting that, and that becomes a small fox in your life. And so Jonah then says here, "Take me, I want to die." Now, does anybody identify that? I mean, there's hundreds of times, isn't it, when we're like, things aren't going our way, and we're like, "Oh, I just want to get out of here. God, finish it all." Because we think we're going to go straight to heaven and, it's going to be all good. Verse 4, "But the Lord replied," and get this, "Is it right for you to be angry?" Okay, turn to your neighbor and say, "Is it right for you to be angry?" Going down a bit further to verse 9, "But God said to Jonah, is it right for you to be angry about the plant?" Because there he was, he'd done his job, he's on his way out, and it was scorching hot sun, and he wanted to lay down and rest, and the plant grew up, and he rested under the shade, and then when he woke up, the plant had shriveled up. Here, "Is it right for you to be angry about the plant?" "It is," he said. This is Jonah. "And I am so angry, I wish I were dead." Now, come on. Do you ever identify with this? Of course you do. Let's be honest. Verse 10, he says, "But the Lord said," the discussion's not over. Aren't you amazed at this discussion that Cain had with God and now Jonah's having with God? How loving and gracious and compassionate is God. There's not, "Oh, holy, sovereign, Lord of all lords." It's just like, "I'm so angry, I want to die." This is a great relationship that Jonah had with God the Father. "But the Lord said, you have been concerned about this plant, though you did not tend it or make it grow. It sprang up overnight and died overnight. And should I not have concern for the great city of Nineveh, in which there are more than 120,000 people who cannot tell their right hand from their left, and also many animals. When you read that, you'll sort of think, what, were they all ambidextrous? They didn't know their left from their right? But what it tells us is that Jonah allowed the foxes to eat the blossom in his life. He was not able to celebrate the amazing victory that happened that day. 120,000 people fasted and prayed, turned from idolatry and turned to God. How would we be here? Like, yeah, if we went through Brisbane City and we preached and that happened, man, we would just be on fire. We would be so pumped. It would be amazing. But he didn't get to celebrate the goodness because he allowed the fox into his life to steal the blossom. And that fox was anger. And it was based in a false perception. You see, right at the beginning, what did he say? It says, verse 1, but to Jonah, this seemed very wrong. And that often, how often does that happen in our lives where we're in situations in the office, at school, at uni, in our family, and we haven't got the 360, we've maybe only got the 90 degree or the 180, and it seems wrong. And we begin to form our opinion on what seems wrong. So that was Cain and that was Jonah, and they got angry and they missed out on the fruitfulness that they could have had because their goals were not based on God's will. Was it right? What about you? What about me? Times that we experience frustration and anger, is it right? Are our goals founded in the Word of God? Moving on to the prodigal in Luke 15:28, we know the prodigal son comes home, the father throws a party, the older brother comes in from the field, and it says here, the older brother became angry and refused to go in. So his father went out and pleaded with him. And of course, he decided, he refused to come in. Do you identify with this? Do you have family members that do that? And sometimes there's a scientific reason for this, like your blood levels are so high and you can't think clearly and you just need space. And we have to allow people that space where something happens, just give them time and they'll be right. He allowed the fox to eat the blossom in his life. He allowed the fox of wrong thinking he had his own opinion about how the father should have treated the brother. And he allowed that to destroy the family relationship. And he missed out on the celebration that night, mainly because he let this little fox steal the blossom in his life. His perception was false and he wasn't willing to do what was right. Contrast that with Naaman. In 2 Kings 5:11, we know that Naaman was with leprosy. His servant girl told him, if you go to Israel, there's a prophet there and he'll heal you. So off he goes. And it says here in verse 11 of chapter 5, 2 Kings, but Naaman went away angry and said, I thought that he would surely come out to me and stand and call on the name of the Lord his God, wave his hand over the spot and cure me of my leprosy. Where was the little fox for Naaman? As soon as he said, I thought he would, expectations. Where did that expectation ever come from? And it says here, he went away angry. In verse 13 to 14, it talks about how his servants pleaded with him. He listened to his servants. He went into the river. He dipped himself 7 times and he came out healed. You know what? The little foxes were not able to steal the blossom from Naaman that day. 2 things. Number 1, people pleaded with him. They talked to him. They took time to show him his false perceptions, his distorted perceptions. But Naaman was obviously an intelligent man, and he listened to those people. Church, find people that you trust, find people that you respect, and let them speak into your life. Then whatever those hopes or those dreams will come to fruition in your life. God pleaded with Cain. He didn't listen. God had long discussions with Jonah. He didn't listen. The father pleaded with the elder son. He didn't listen. The servants pleaded with Naaman, and he received the blessing. He found healing. Catch the fox before it destroys the blossom in your life.